Hello, everybody, and welcome to the TEACHERCAST Educational Network. My name is Jeff Bradbury. Thank you so much for joining us today and making TEACHERCAST your home for professional development. In this episode of Digital Learning today, we welcome back on Laura Stewart, the Chief Academic Officer from the 95% Group. Laura, how are you today? Welcome back to TEACHERCAST.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. I'm delighted to be back. You know, we had a wonderful conversation last week with Kymyona Burk, and this week is part two because there's such a robust list of topics for us to talk about. So here's part two. I hope you all enjoy it. What impact is this science of reading movement having, and how are we measuring that impact?
I think with the science of reading movement, there are now at least about 37 states that have adopted policies around the science of reading, some more comprehensive than others. North Carolina, for example, and also Louisiana. ExcelinEd has what we consider 18 fundamental principles of a comprehensive literacy policy. These fundamental principles ensure that the policy addresses how to support educators, right? School teachers and administrators, of course, funding, including educator preparation programs in the alignment, how to support parents and families with parent notification, and also individual reading plans and support at home. And then last but not least, of course, how to support students to ensure that they're receiving core Tier 1 instruction that is strong, aligned to the science of reading, interventions being screened to be identified early, and those things. So North Carolina, Louisiana, they have adopted all 18 principles. They have had their measurement with their universal screener. North Carolina, I believe, with their screener data, that they are leading nationally with their screener data, specifically in first grade. Louisiana just released the results of their screener, that they're using a universal screener from beginning to end of year, where they saw a lot of growth with their students. So there are going to be, of course, different state measures, right? Individual state measures. Well, then, of course, we're all looking to NAEP, right? We all look at NAEP, fourth grade reading, to really get that comparison across states. But I do want to just make a point in saying that although these laws are considered third grade reading laws, this is not just a third grade teacher's responsibility, right? These comprehensive policies begin with support for students and their families, of course, in kindergarten, early identification, and all of those things leading up to third grade. So, I love your 95%. What it represents, because we can support students, we can support them very early, and we can get at least 95% of our kids reading.
That's right. I like to always say at least 95%, right?
That's right.
You mentioned, the impact that you're having in ExcelinEd. Can you tell our listeners what's your website if they want to check out those principles that you were talking about?
Oh, sure. We have a website that's dedicated to policy and implementation, policy adoption and implementation. And their website is earlyliteracymatters.org. We have a literacy map where you can click on your state to see what your state has adopted. But also we have filters where each of those principles that I mentioned, you can click on a filter and it'll generate a heat map to show you how many states have adopted professional development, how many have adopted coaching, how many states even have promotion and retention policies. And then you can go to each state's solo page, and you will then have access to that state's implementation analysis report. We focused a lot on adoption in the past, which states have adopted which principles. And now, because there have been so many states that have adopted principles, we want to see how well are these principles being implemented. So we have an implementation analysis report for each state, for each of the fundamental principles, to no adoption, to partial implementation, and even to future implementation. And you'll get an opportunity to see all of the different strategies that they're using. So for states that have not adopted policies, or for states that have adopted policies and are looking for ways to strengthen their implementation, there are a lot of things that you can go on and just kind of borrow from what other states are doing. So It's a great website.
Yeah, I've been on your website a lot because I really appreciate all the resources that you provide to really kind of help all of our invested parties with a roadmap of actions they can take. And that's the other thing I like about the Reading League Compass. It's, what actions can you take from whatever role you're playing in this? And, we are all playing a role. This is the investment we're all making is important for all of us. Like I always say, I want, our students to thrive as literate citizens of the 21st century and flourish. And I think we all want that. We all want that.
Yes.
And so we're all invested parties in all of this. So just a couple more questions. One is, in your estimation and your experience, your deep knowledge, how can we make this stick? I worry a little bit about that. I worry about this implementation. How do we keep it moving forward? How do we make it stick?
Oh gosh, I've been asked that question so many times. There have been so many fads. There have been so many, oh, this is just something that's passing by. I think our stakeholder awareness is what's going to make this stick. I think the messaging, but I also think that, the policy piece of it, where we have these champions for policy, that we have to be able to communicate our intent for the policy, to get feedback. I've spoken to several people, and they say, well, we feel like this policy is happening to us, right? And not with us. So messaging matters. In Maryland right now, former Mississippi State Superintendent Dr. Carrie Wright is now the state chief in Maryland.
That's right.
And yes, and they are looking to adopt a policy, but right now they have it out for public comment, which is something that a lot of states have not done prior to, right, a legislator or someone championing the law in that part of the process. So they do have it out for public comment and have been really talking to a lot of the stakeholders about it. I think that one of the groups that has not really also been considered much, but I had a great opportunity to speak to the National School Boards Association earlier this year. Our school boards at the local level are those who are making decisions about the curricula, right, and other things that should be adopted. And I think that a part of moving this forward and making this stick is that they are knowledgeable and that they are not forgotten in this conversation, because they have to be knowledgeable to make the right decisions for their schools, districts, and parents and families. So I think the way that we make it stick is continuous messaging, buy-in, transparency, even when you don't have all the answers, right? I think that all of those things, and the stakeholder awareness about what we need to do to be sure that students are ready to move on to the next grade level, I think that's going to help us a lot.
And I love that you mentioned school boards.
Yeah.
Because I think they are an untapped resource for us.
Yes.
Because these are community members that have a stake in how their students come out of their schools and back into the community. And I know that I've spoken to, as you have spoken to, different groups of school board members, and they're eager and curious for this information, so that they can make the right moves. Because ultimately, the buck stops with them in these decisions around curricula, around professional learning, how they spend the resources. So I think I'm really glad that you mentioned that specific group of people that we want to help empower and support.
Yes.
So
indeed.
yeah, thank you for that. So I have one last question for you, because I've heard you say this, Kymyona, and I love this, that this is the most solvable of problems. I just love that.
Indeed.
So what are you hopeful about, and what are you most hopeful for?
I think what I'm hopeful about is that there are so many champions for literacy improvement. I think that as a result of COVID-19, the anticipation of how it would impact our education system as a whole, there was just a lot of financial support, of course, that was put into schools and districts for them to make these decisions, like for overhauling infrastructure, management systems, and those things. So I'm hopeful about the fact that this has become a national issue. As you know, I'm part of the Right to Read film, and we've done screenings across the country. There are also other films that are great, that are really kind of illuminating this issue around reading being a national crisis at this point. So I'm hopeful about the champions, the decoding dyslexia, right? The reading leagues, like the 95% group, the amplifies, all of the people who are coming to this party and are saying, you know, I'm in it. I'm in it with you. And, you know, I've spoken about collective impact on a few occasions. And I think that, you know, there are a lot of people in this space now, but we can have collective impact as long as we are all looking to achieve the same goal. So I'm really hopeful about that to all of the people who've shown up. And I thank you for that.
Yes.
I'm hopeful for, I believe that, and I'll just kind of end on this about the Mississippi story. We are now 21st in the country, according to the latest NAEP results overall from 50th, right, just over a decade ago. And our Black and Hispanic students are 5th in the nation. Our free and reduced lunch students are 2nd in the nation. And I've said many times that once you see that in really the poorest state in the nation, right, then you can't unsee that. So I'm hopeful for other states, other districts, other communities to see that this is possible as long as you invest in people, invest in their knowledge, and do all of the things to support them, that this is possible and that they don't take no for an answer. And that they continue to fight to ensure that children get what they need, because it is possible anywhere, even in Mississippi.
Thank you so much for that. You know, it's that persistence. And I was just talking with a teacher recently, and she said, you know, once you've seen the light bulb go off with a child, when a child learns to read, that is the best feeling in the world. And that propels us all forward with this sense of hope. And I appreciate so much that you've named that. You know, you and I met back in Mississippi, and we've done some work together at the Reading League. And I remember it wasn't that long ago, we were in Delaware. I think we were doing some work in Delaware.
That's right.
Yeah. And I also just want to thank you for your support of 95% Group, because you've spoken on our behalf and we've done webinars together. So thank you so much for that. And thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it, Kymyona.
Thank you so much for being such a champion in this space, Laura. It's great to talk to you.
Oh, right back at you. I really enjoyed my conversation with Kymyona, and I hope you did too. I know we talked about a lot of different topics around the science of reading and all the levers we need to pull to make a difference. I hope this was helpful and enjoyable for everyone. I'm going to turn it back to you, Jeffrey.
Laura, thank you so much for this great conversation. And if you out there listening are looking for more information about the 95% Group, you can head on over to teachercast.net/95% Group for all of our shows and blog posts featuring this amazing company. So on behalf of Laura and Kymyona and everybody here on TeacherCast, my name is Jeff Bradbury, reminding you guys to keep up the great work in your classrooms and continue sharing your passions with your students.